Vanguard! I was originally planning not to do this video, but it's YouTube tradition by this time that once there's a new banlist coming, that we make banlist prediction videos. And also you guys been asking me about my prediction and what I think is gonna be on a banlist. So that's what we're gonna do today. There isn't actually a lot to talk about in terms of premium and standard for quite obvious reasons, but we get into those particular reasons once we're gonna tackle their format. And I want to begin this video with the number one thing that I think is going to get banned, or at least what should be on the ban list, and you probably already know what I'm referring to, as that is Zazan. I mean, the countless videos speak for themselves that Zazan needs to get banned. So my number one prediction and my expectation and also my wish and hope that it actually happens is that Zazan gets banned. And now that we're on the topic of premium, let's talk about the premium format and what could else be banned or limited or something done in this format. And honestly, there isn't actually a lot to go over here because there isn't a lot of results that we've seen with the new premium collection, and that means that's also really hard to gauge which cards or which clans might be a bit too oppressive or too strong for their taste or for the liking of Bushiroad, that they want to limit their power potential. But what we also heard from other professional players and players that have been playtesting this set is that if Zazan is removed from the equation, then the format is quite healthy and it's actually a pretty good place to be. So that basically gives us an insight that after Zazan is banned, there might not need anything else to get limited or banned. However, that said, there are some things that have been thrown around in the community and people have been discussing about other things they can limit. And one of the main things is the Calico card that was one of the kickstarters of the whole Zazan campaign that led to potentially banning of this card. Now, personally, I don't think Calico should get limited, banned, or whatsoever. The reason for that is if Zazan gets removed from the game, then that card in itself isn't really problematic anymore. Yes, the card is very powerful, especially with the new Amaterasu that's coming quite soon to our format, but if Zazan is removed, that means the only way to actually access this card early game, because it's a GB1 skill, is that you have Tempest Sphere in your hand and your opponent gives you the counterblast. Now, sure, it's the same odds as using a Zazan, but your opponent deciding if you can activate the card or not is huge, and there are other decks in the previous era of Premium that had a same kind of power behind one single counterblast. The Riviere deck comes to mind that wasn't a big issue because your opponent can just decide, alright, in the first couple of turns I'm not gonna give you damage until I'm ready and I can do my stuff, and then I don't mind you activating your Tempest Sphere to then use Calico, as at that time it doesn't really matter because you're gonna stride anyway. So that's the reason why I don't think that Calico is a bad card and could easily just stay in the game. Now, with talking about Riviere, then Riviere is also one of those potential hits where a lot of people have been talking about that should get restricted. And I believe I even talked about this at a banlist prediction video at the beginning of this year, that it could be a bit too oppressive, especially with the new Riviere that was just out of the Crystal Melody set. But I'm not so sure if the Riviere card is, and with her support grade 3 that allows you to superior right and then superior stride against your opponent, is all that oppressive in this current stage of Premium, because the cards were released for a couple of times even before Zazan was a thing, and we had some online tournament results of Cardfight Vision that hosted multiple premium tournaments, and even there we didn't really saw an oppressive amount of Bermuda players winning and topping the events they hosted. And sure, Katrina was still unbanned at the time, but even Katrina wasn't really that oppressive and didn't have a lot of tops. So I'm not sure if hitting Riviere is a good thing or actually is needed, because don't forget, those results where Riviere didn't top as much were before the premium collection stride for all the other clans came out were a thing. And Bermuda Triangle's premium collection stride isn't going to help Riviere one single bit. So that's the reason why I don't think those cards should be hit. But that said, a card in premium that I think should be hit, or at least in some capacity be limited in its power potential, is Gastille. Gastille is a odd card, as it's such a powerful card and has endless possibilities, and would probably be a thorn in Bushiroad's side for the end of times where they decide to give Dark Irregulars more support, because they always need to think about Gastille exists. And we see this, that every time they bring out a new boss grade 3 unit or a new VR, Gastille gets an immense power boost. We've seen this time and time again with NOK, alright, not Dantarian, but then Brufus came out, and we're gonna see it again with Shaharat. Because when Shaharat enters the format, then Dark Irregulars players can attack with the rearguards, then attack with the Vanguard, and they copy NOK and Shaharat, meaning the front row is immensely powered up. Then also restand the front row because of the Shaharat on attack skill. Then rewrite into a Shaharat from Soul. Then attack with the rearguards again. Then attack with the Vanguard Shaharat. And then attack with the rearguards again because you could restand your Vanguards again. It does cost quite a amount of counterblast, but Dark Irregulars can easily get that counterblast back with all their countercharging. So giving Dark Irregulars such a multi-tech potential, with hard lag still being in the format, could just end games on first try very easily for the Dark Irregulars player. Granted, Premium is getting faster and faster and faster, but it depends on what type of decision Bushiroad wants to make and what type of vision they have for the Premium format, that they might or might not want to limit Gastille in some way, because Gastille will always be a limiting factor for designing future cards for Dark Irregulars. And the fact that they banned hard lag in Standard because of such a thing that it will limit their power potential or their card design for the next set, because it becomes easier to facilitate hard lag, and we've seen that with the new support and also with the restanding of Shaharat, makes hard lag maybe a little bit too strong for what it actually was meant to be. But that's also in Premium, so they might or might not ban or limit Gastille in some way. And that's basically all we have for Premium, in my opinion. Zazan needs to get banned, and maybe they will do something with Gastille to keep that card in check, because it could be a problematic thing in the future, or actually will be a problem once Shaharat hits the format. Now, from Premium, we're gonna go to Standard, and Standard, in my honest opinion, is in a really good spot. The result so far shows a very good distribution of multiple clans and multiple decks actually participating in the top cuts. There isn't one particular deck that's dominating like crazy. Yes, two decks are very prominent. That's Messiahs and Overlord, which have a quite sizable chunk of the pie charts or topping tables, but it's not like they take over 60, 70, 80%. We still see good results for Susanoo. We still see good results for Altmao, Chronojet, even Arsha takes one or two spots here. Vanquisher, sometimes Revan comes into the game, and we see also the other cards for specific decks like Rebellion suddenly popping up here and there. So I think Standard is in a really good spot. However, that said, I think there might be a restriction or a hit to Link Joker and Overlord to some degree, to rein in their decks a little bit, or in another way to make the game more fun for people to experience, because both of those decks have a certain aspect to them that might not be a fun interaction while you're playing against them or when certain things happen. And the one for Link Joker is they're great for Beast unit that is full Kog'Heed. That's just a 30k unit that multi-attacks, gives a lot of power, and because it is such a strong unit, can keep swinging in with Force 2, so double crit. And that might be a little bit too oppressive, and there is a chance that Bushiroad might limit this card. I'm not saying they're gonna ban this because that's way overboard, but they could say that they limit this card to a maximum of 2 copies per deck, as it's still a vital key card for the deck, but having multiple copies of it, 3 to 4, might be a little bit too much in the amount of consistency, as it's such a strong card and can be very oppressive against your opponent. Limited to 3 is probably not doing anything, because a lot of decks just either run only 3 copies, but putting it to 2 lessens the consistency of this particular card, but doesn't make it unplayable or usable, and also won't make the Messiah's deck completely useless. It will still be a good solid deck, but they have a less effective or less consistency for the Grade 4 beater that's basically mainly used to finish the game. Now for Overlord's side, I think Overlord the Cross itself is a bad designed card. I haven't really talked about this card in particular because the set reviews and all the videos about this particular sets aren't on the channel yet. It will come soon once I wrap up the Try Free set. But my opinion is that Overlord the Cross is a mistake to some degree. Not that the card is too powerful or too broken, because there are some problems with it in the fact that it's not the super most consistent card, and it leaves you a little bit defenseless if you're misusing the card. But the thing about this card that makes it a mistake is that it's not a fun card to play against. Your opponent goes first, they get Overlord across, you probably dead. And there's nothing that you're gonna do about it. Some decks can maybe squeeze out an extra turn if in some miracle way gets all defense triggers, heals one time, or got a good amount of draw triggers that they could guard against certain attacks. But being able to attack 3 times with the Vanguard with either Force 1 or Force 2 on top of that, and in most cases it's going to be Force 2, because they have multiple cards that power up the Vanguard, like Calamity Dragon, the Grade 1 restanding unit, also the Grade 1 that can put yourself into the soul to give the Vanguard additional 5k. Those cards make Overlord across, in my opinion, a bit too consistent and a bit too oppressive. And even Overlord the Cross itself is way too consistent in the sense that they have the Grade 3 generic searcher, they have the Overlord the Cross specific searcher, they have the Grade 2 that can search out any Overlord. There are way too much searchers for Overlord the Cross, where you can just increase the consistency of this deck to an ungodly amount that isn't really good game design in my honest opinion. So they might do something about Overlord the Cross. They can either limit the card itself, or they're gonna limit Overlord the end, that you can maybe only run 1 copy in combination with Overlord the Cross, because yes, you can give it 1 time, but after that they need to use multiple cards or a specific order of cards, so you're able to put the Overlord to the end into the drop zone and then back into the deck, and it makes the deck a little bit less consistent, because the deck doesn't always kill on the first Grade 3 turn. But if they can just do that over and over and over and over again, it basically, the deck doesn't need anything else. They just need to sit on Overlord the Cross, and that's it. They just keep doing 3 attacks with the Vanguard, 3 attacks with the Vanguard, 3 attacks with the Vanguard. What you do to their hand, they don't care. What you do to the field, they don't care. And that, in my honest opinion, makes the deck not fun to play against, and could be somewhat of annoyance in a competitive format, and just for anybody that tries to enjoy the game. So they might do something about Overlord the Cross. Now you could also say they should hit something for Narukami or Aquaforce. I don't think they're gonna do that, and I don't think they should do that, because those decks are nowhere near as oppressive or as dominant in the meta as they were a couple of months ago, once the other Axel decks got hit in the big ban list beginning this year. And the reason why they shouldn't get hit, and why some stuff like Angerblader and Shiryuki and Silverthorn should got hit at the time, is because once that ban list came around, Angerblader, Silverthorns, and Hyuga were still at almost the same power level as Revan and Vanquisher. And for that reason, and in some cases maybe even a little bit above them, and for that reason they should have hit those cards to make the meta a little bit healthier. Because it doesn't matter if you play Vanquish and have all the multi-tech cards available. If you're up against Tachikaze, they win first and they go into Anger later, you probably dead. So that's the reason why they had to limit those cards at the time. In this current stage, even if you're up against Vanquisher or Revan, and you play something like Overlord the Cross or Susanoo or Link Joker or next stage, you can still fight back. And it's basically an equal fight, and it is seen in the results where Revan and Vanquisher are taking the back burner on the results. They still have some tops here and there, but they're not as dominant as they used to be. They can still be in the metagame, but they're no big threat at the moment. And that's basically all my predictions for the ban list. There's actually not a lot. The only major prediction that I have is that Zazan needs to get banned and hopefully gets banned, but all the other things are potential. They could potentially do something to Gasteel. They could potentially do something for Overlord the Cross and Volkogeet in Standard. But should they and would they? I don't think that's actually gonna be the case. They might do some very specific limits or bans, just like we've seen with Hard Leg and the Frankenstein monster, which name I cannot remember, for Grand Blue. So they might do something like that, like a preemptive ban for future support that might come out for Luard or Shadow Paladin, Tachikaze, Spike Brothers, Mega Conley, Aquaforce, or the other clans that are going to get support. They might do something like that where we have no idea what type of insane combo that could come up with the new support. But for what we know right now, probably Zazan and potentially something about those 3 specific cards. Now, with that said, I'm curious of what you guys think is going to happen this Tuesday when the ban list drops. Do you think Zazan is actually gonna be banned? Do you think the Zazan to Zero movement worked? Or do you think that's not gonna happen? They probably might not do anything of significance, or they just gonna do outright nothing. But I do think they're gonna hit something. But what they're gonna hit is gonna be very interesting, and I definitely think it's gonna shake up the community in 2 days once we're gonna get the news live stream on Tuesday. But with that said, I want to thank my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider for making this video and everything on the channel possible. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply do that by going over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.